I'm increasingly fascinated by now as we move out of TI4, the International 4, watching Dota teams kind of fracture and split.
Yeah.
That has been really fascinating. Are you following any of this, Kyle? I know you're a big league guy. But
No, I'm not following it, but I definitely am interested in it because it's such an interesting dynamic in the pro scene, especially esports. Like, watching these guys, they're essentially becoming free agents. Like, hey, check it out. This was my performance last year.
Yep.
Who wants me?
Yeah, so as of now, I think Navi, who's a big fan favorite team, is down to just 3 of its original members, or the core members. Kuroki and Puppy are now
and also
gone.
Their core players.
Yes, that's
core
true.
as in the core,
Yeah,
role,
yeah.
not as in like best or anything.
Yeah. Kuroki and Puppy are gone. Burning from DK and RLTK from Vici Gaming are retiring. There's
Sing Sing.
Sing Sing is moving on to another team. Who knows? Like, all these players that we saw at TI4 who were part of losing teams are all going somewhere else. And there's tons of rumors flying about who's going to go where and who's going to replace who on Navi and who's going to start their own team or who's going to join Cloud9. What do you guys make of all this as teams start to fracture? It's a weird thing for me as somebody who's new to esports, but you look at sports, normal, regular sports, quote, you see a lot of teams trading and you see guys go free agents, like LeBron last year, 2 years ago, whatever that was. That was a huge deal. But it was a normal thing. It's just a normal part of the sports process. I don't know. How do you guys feel about this in the esports?
I like it. It's variety. You also get the fact that you're going to start well, I don't know for a fact for the Dota fracturing of teams, but you start breaking up these powerhouses and these really good players start dissipating and going to different teams, and you have the potential of these very experienced veteran players who are going to be able to take newer players or amateur players or not as professional players and under their wings and show them the ropes with all their experience and their wins and their track record and all that stuff. Variety is always good.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see guys like Bulba, Pycat, and Sing Sing potentially forming their own team. And you look at that entire roster and you're like, okay, well, who's playing where? Because these are guys who typically play these positions, and they don't necessarily all line up with each other. So now a player who I'm used to seeing in mid might be playing a support role, like the 5 position or something.
Yeah.
There's potential there.
I think TI4 was probably a wake-up for a lot of teams, wake-up call. Because all of the teams that were usually like the dominant powerhouse teams from TI3 and like following that, they weren't in the finals.
That's the beauty of
make it
esports,
close.
though.
Yeah.
Very true.
The beauty of esports, it's like nothing's guaranteed. Like, oh, cool, you won last year. It doesn't matter this year. It's a different year.
But it's sort of like Navi was at the finals every single year up until this year.
And this year they got into the first upper bracket round in the finals and got knocked out.
It's just like certain teams' playstyles work better when certain metas are like prominent.
Yeah.
And I think this year people saw like there's this crazy push meta. That, like, 'cause so many games were short this year, like under 20 minutes.
Yeah,
that wasn't really a thing at TI3. And I think people are kind of like just reassessing like who they're working with, who's leading them, who's their captain, who's drafting for them, and they're finding like maybe we'll find more success elsewhere. Like all these people know each other.
Yeah,
I went to TI4 early and went to like a meetup with Cloud9 and Alliance, and I was talking with Loda, who's the carry player on Alliance, and he's like, we play with each other all the time. We scrimmage.
Yeah, they scrim all the time.
They've known each other for a decade since Dota. Like. If you're not finding success on a team and you think you could pair up with some of your other friends, it's hard to blame them.
Yeah. I mean, does this happen after LCS ever? Does the meta shift enough to require that? Like, oh, these players aren't working. Get rid of them. Get people in who can maybe be part of a stronger push meta versus team fight meta.
You do see like players leaving. I can't name any off the top of my head, but
Sure.
you do see it happen. The meta, I don't feel like the meta changes very often in League. I don't know if you'd agree.
Yeah, there's like per patch there's like occasional like small shifts.
Yeah.
But that's also like it depends on how Riot sees the meta and how they want to focus it. It's a lot more like how they see it. Like you'll see stuff like I don't know. There were some weird things where people were running Vayne top.
Oh yeah.
Which is like an ADC. Which
Sure.
is like
that's not where you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but there's not a lot of changes. Like people tend to stay in the scene anyway. Like Hotshot, who played on CLG, he's just like a coach and also an owner, so
Yeah.
he's just around.
They become permanent fixtures. A lot of these
Yeah.
big names, like they're like even if they leave teams, they're gonna be involved in some way.
Skara.
Yeah.
Skara is a huge example.
With the meta, what I've been seeing is it seems like a lot of the new champions that are getting made, the big thing that's happening with them is you're getting movement abilities. You know, Gnar has his hop, Yasuo has his little dash and his all that stuff. So perhaps Riot's trying to change them. Well, not change it because it's still always a part of it, but have the meta focus more on mobility and positioning, which has always been a big part, but it seems to become the more big focus when it comes to it.
I wonder at what point that starts to topple too heavily to one side. You know,
yeah.
5 heroes from now, if they're all based on mobility, suddenly the original cast starts to look a little frail. Like they're not.
That's been
they
happening.
Can't do it.
That has
They
been
can't
like
keep
people
up.
who are good have been falling out of favor.
Yep.
Just because like
Because they can't. They literally can't keep up with these new heroes.
The interesting thing about, I think, the league especially is that you can, if you look at the Challenger League, you can actually see people who are probably on beyond teams within the next like a year.
Yeah.
Because the people who are in Challenger are the best players.
Yeah.
And
Hands
so
down.
we have seen players come up and like you can see it. You can go in client and look at the Challenger League and be like, okay, look at all these names and see what, like, spectate them and probably look them up on Twitch, and they're probably the ones that will be on teams within the next 6 months.
I'll be curious to see. I mean, if you look at a team like Navi and they're down 2 players, and maybe they're doing this to adopt 2 more players who are more in, you know, they lean more toward that push inclination in the meta that we saw a lot of at TI4. I have to wonder if the meta changes over the next year will necessitate those kinds of adoptions. Like, if you get 2 players who you want to be able to play a certain way, and the meta changes because, they patched the Lycan and they patched these characters because they were too heavily slanted toward a certain play style, and now they're more balanced out, a little more even keel for everybody. At what point do you think like, oh shoot, we got these players and they're of no value to us now because everything changed?
I actually think we'll start to see that next week because it's Red Bull Battlegrounds, and we'll know who the new Navi lineup is. I think it's next week.
It's soon. I'm not sure. It's
Yeah,
next week,
but
yeah.
I think next week will be when we start to see, because we haven't really seen a lot of pro games since TI, so we don't really know how stuff's changed.
Huh.
Obviously you guys know I don't play Dota, but I actually watched the TI4 and I loved it. It was super entertaining. Like, I don't know the game and the moves and stuff, but it was really entertaining. But I did see the push meta you guys were talking about. It looked like a lot of the more successful teams were focusing on pressing their advantage when they had it. Like, oh, we're in the lead. Okay, let's hammer them.
Which is very, very different than, like, you know, you look at a record-setting team like Rocket in the LCS, a team that, you know, rivaled kill counts, lowest deaths, things like that. And it's like these are guys who are about team fights. They're about wiping an entire team, taking a tower, getting it back, and then wiping a team again. It's over and over and over about fights, and that was not what TI4 was about.
No, yeah. A lot of teams try to the grind them out method, like a war of attrition. Like, let's just get ahead of them as far as we can until they literally can't do anything. But TI4 looked like they were like, oh, we're ahead. We've got the advantage. Let's punish them for it. Let's push up the lane and take what we can right now, which is always a good strategy.
You know what's a good example of that? Pitlord meta versus Ace Ventura, the recreational
In the recreational tournament?
That was...
The games industry started 2 tournament, James.
Yes. Go check those out. Those were some quick games, and were actually really good. They weren't like completely like TI4 meta picks, but it was like if a really good like depth look at like how to push very fast.
Sure.